What's up guys, Shine here, and today we are doing a camera comparison between Samsung's $1,200 S21 Ultra and Poco's $350 F3. This test isn't really to see which camera system is better, because obviously that would be the S21 Ultra. Rather, this comparison is being done to see by just how much better the S21 Ultra camera is, and if it's actually worth paying 3 times more money for it. So without further ado guys, let's get into the specifications. The Samsung has a 108 megapixel Samsung HM3 sensor with an f1.8 aperture, hybrid autofocus and OIS. It also has a 10 megapixel 10x periscope camera along with a 10 megapixel 3x telephoto camera. To round it off, it has a 12 megapixel ultra-wide with an aperture of f2.2. The S21 Ultra is capable of recording at up to 8K 24 FPS. Meanwhile, the Poco F3 comes with a 48 megapixel IMX582 sensor at f1.8 aperture with face detection autofocus. It also has an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera at f2.2 aperture and a 5 megapixel macro camera. The Poco F3 is capable of recording at up to 4K 30 FPS. So with that out of the way guys, let's get into the pictures. As far as daytime shots are concerned from the main camera of both phones, they both produce very pleasing images, with the Poco going for a more warmer, less contrasty image compared to the Samsung. It is to be noted that in this situation, the Poco does have a more color-accurate picture. When zooming in, we see that both of them have roughly the same detail, but in this case, the Poco has a slight edge over the Samsung. Moving on to the second picture, there's barely any difference between the two, other than the difference in color, with the Poco being a little more warmer. And also in this situation, both of the phones' HDRs were on, and the Poco seems to have better dynamic range, as you can see with the clouds having more detail, and the table and everything on top are slightly brighter as well in the Poco's image. With the ultrawide cameras during the day, the story is very similar to the main cameras, where the F3 is going for a warmer, less contrasty look, while the Samsung is looking to saturate and really brighten up its colors. Although in this situation, the Samsung does have a very over-sharpened look, which, even though it has more detail, makes the picture look a tad bit less appealing. In high-definition mode, the Samsung is shooting in 108 megapixels while the Poco is shooting in 48. Also, during the high-definition mode, the Poco does not use HDR, and that's clear to see with how well the Samsung has exposed the sky and the shadows in this image compared to the Poco. When we zoom in, we can clearly see that because of the 108 megapixel advantage to the Samsung, its images are quite a lot sharper when compared to the 48 megapixels of the Poco. In this example, we're going to be looking at this image, which we will then be zooming into to see how well the zoom capabilities are on both phones. So just looking at the raw 12 megapixel image that we get from both phones, we can see that the Samsung has done a better job with the dynamic range, having a better exposed sky and slightly brighter shadows. That being said, the detail on both of the phones is roughly the same as we saw in the previous auto mode comparison. Zooming in 2x, the Samsung has brightened up the shadows a lot more than the Poco, and otherwise the detail between the two phones is still roughly similar because the Samsung has not switched to its 3x telephoto camera. Zooming in even more to 10x, we can see that it is a night and day difference between the two phones because the Poco does not have any telephoto camera at all, so it's just applying digital zoom, while the Samsung is using its 10x periscope camera to give us a very clear image. Like with high definition mode, the Poco does not use HDR as much in portrait mode either, and that can be seen in this image where the Samsung has a way better dynamic range, with it having a nice blue sky while the Poco has it completely blown out. That being said, the Poco has handled my skin tone and my shirt colors better. Also, When you zoom in, you can see that the Poco does have more detail than the Samsung in this situation. The story of the second portrait image is roughly the same from the first. The Samsung has better dynamic range, while the Poco has brightened up the person a little bit more. But interestingly, when you zoom in this image, you can see that the detail on both of the phones is the same. But having said that, the Poco does have slightly more noise than the Samsung in this particular image. When talking about front camera images during the day, the Poco not only has a wider field of view, but in this situation it has done a better job with the dynamic range, since it has captured some of the blue sky where the Samsung has completely blown it out. And also it has a less contrasty image, and it is giving out a more accurate representation of my skin tones and the color of my shirt. Zooming into the image, we can also see that the Poco has a sharper image compared to the Samsung. In close-up shots, the pictures on both of the phones are very similar, with the Samsung being slightly brighter and having a little bit more saturation. In this instance, I'd say it's up to personal preference which picture is better, because both of them have a good amount of detail and they have a really nice background blur. Due to the Poco having a dedicated macro camera, it is able to get a lot closer onto objects and takes much finer looking images in comparison. Also, while using the focus enhance feature, which doubles as kind of a macro mode on the S21 Ultra, you cannot use flash, and that can cause some problem in low light situations like in the second image, where the lemon could not be exposed properly without a flash.
This is 8K recording at 24 FPS on the Samsung S21 Ultra and 4K 30 on the Poco F3. Super steady mode is not on the Samsung. This is me moving the phones up and down, side to side, to see what the stabilization is like, and I'm walking. So yeah. This is 4K video recording on the back of the Galaxy S21 Ultra and the Poco F3. The Samsung 8K 30 FPS and 4K 60, while the Poco is capped to 4K 30. This is video recording on the ultra-wide cameras. The Samsung can go up to 4K 30 FPS and I'm pretty sure 60, while the Poco is capped at 1080p 30 on the ultra-wide. This is front-facing video recording on the Galaxy S21 Ultra and the Poco F3. The S21 Ultra is shooting in 4K 30 FPS, while the Poco is shooting in 1080p 30. The S21 Ultra goes up to 4K 60 at max, while the Poco goes up to 1080p 60.
This is close-up video on the Poco and the Samsung. They're both running at 4K 30 FPS. During nighttime, with both phones set to auto, we can see that the Poco has slightly better dynamic range, as it's handled the lights and the shadows better than the Samsung, but upon zooming in, the Samsung is quite a bit sharper than the Poco. When using night mode on both phones, the shot from the S21 Ultra is leagues above the shot from the F3. It has better lighting, better control of shadows, of highlights, and on zooming in, it is quite a bit sharper than the Poco, as you can make out the flowers in the leaves, which you can't even see on the F3. During nighttime, it is no comparison between the two ultra-wide shooters of the F3 and the S21 Ultra. The S21 Ultra is brighter, has better dynamic range, and it has just way more detail in the image. Moving on to night mode though, and the brightness aspect of both images equalizes a bit. and the Poco has handled the lights in the lawn a little better than the Samsung. That being said, the detail difference between the two phones cannot be ignored. For example, look at the left side of the big tree on the Samsung S21 Ultra and look at the same tree on the F3. It is a night and day difference between the two phones. With the front camera images at night, the Poco has a brighter image and it's handled my skin tone a little better, where the Samsung is making it darker than it actually is. Also, at first glance, it seems that the image from the Poco is sharper in this situation, but if you zoom in, you can see that there's a lot of noise in the Poco image, and that in reality, the Samsung is showing more of my mustache and beard.
This is nighttime video from the back cameras of the Poco F3 and the Samsung S21 Ultra. The Poco F3 having the larger sensor with OIS. Both phones are at 4K 30 FPS. And this is front-facing video on the Poco F3 and the S21 Ultra. Poco again running at 1080p 30 maxed out, while the Samsung can go up to 4K 30.
So, in conclusion, the camera system on the Samsung S21 Ultra is, as expected, better than the Poco F3. That being said, the question of whether it is worth the extra price arises, and to that I'd say it depends. If you're the type of person who wants the best that a smartphone camera has to offer, then you should go for the Samsung. But if you are someone who just casually uses the camera on your phone, then the Poco is more than enough. The Poco has good quality shots and videos during the day and acceptable performance during the night. I would have liked to have seen the IMX586 sensor on the Poco rather than the 582, so it could have been able to record at 4K 60. But otherwise, I am impressed with the Poco camera because it does hold up considerably well during daytime images with the Samsung, and the Samsung obviously destroying it at nighttime. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment whether if you were surprised by the results or not, and please subscribe. Peace.